In a moment that left even senior royals stunned, Princess Anne revealed a secret so profound it sent shockwaves through the monarchy that Catherine, not Camilla, had inherited the Queen's most treasured jewels. It began with a whisper inside the palace halls, subtle, unconfirmed, and nearly dismissed. But when Princess Anne stepped forward and confirmed what many suspected, the monarchy was shaken to its core. With an unwavering voice and eyes that held the weight of her mother's memory, Anne revealed that Queen Elizabeth had entrusted her most prized private jewels, not to Camilla, the current Queen Consort, but to Catherine, the Princess of Wales. This wasn't just about pearls and diamonds. It was about legacy, authority, and the silent codes embedded deep within the royal bloodline. Camilla, standing in her official title and regal attire, expected those treasures as a formality. After all, she now bore the crown beside King Charles. But Anne's statement rendered all assumptions obsolete. A secret letter left by the late Queen laid it bare when Catherine was chosen. The Queen had made her decision long before her final days, and Anne was the only royal entrusted to guard this truth until the time was right. And now, with the monarchy in transition, Anne honored that sacred trust. The jewels in question weren't part of the state's crown jewels, which are held in trust and passed through generations of monarchs. These were the Queen's personal collection items steeped in intimacy, in memories, in whispers only shared among the most trusted. From the Cartier halo tiara to the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace, each piece carried more than weight, it carried power. Anne didn't just confirm the inheritance, she confirmed the Queen's vision for the monarchy's future. What rattled the palace most was not just who received the jewels, but who didn't. Camilla had clawed her way through decades of scandal, silence, and skepticism to stand as Queen Consort. She had assumed this private inheritance would come as a coronation of legitimacy. Instead, she was left with the trappings of duty, but not the intimate seal of legacy, and that distinction has become impossible to ignore. Behind palace doors, insiders whispered of tensions. Camilla, blindsided, William, resolute, and Catherine, quietly carrying the burden of expectation now laced in gemstones. Anne's revelation wasn't a family anecdote, it was a line in the sand, drawn by the Queen herself, long before her passing. This wasn't favoritism, it was succession by character. But this wasn't just about jewelry. It was about legacy, power, and who truly embodied the Queen's enduring vision for the monarchy. To most, a diamond tiara is just decoration. To Queen Elizabeth, it was her sharpest tool in statecraft, a wordless language of loyalty and leadership. From the moment she ascended the throne, Elizabeth understood that her reign wouldn't be defined merely by speeches or decrees but by symbols. And few symbols held more weight than the jewels she chose to wear, lend, or withhold. Each glittering brooch, necklace, and tiara wasn't an accessory. It was a calculated message. A signal sent not just to the public, but to those within the royal circle, especially those being quietly tested for future roles. The Queen's Welsh gold wedding ring was more than a matrimonial token. It connected her to generations of royal brides who wore the same rare gold, reinforcing the monarchy's age-old traditions in even the most intimate of settings. And yet, when Elizabeth stepped onto German soil in 1965 wearing the Hesse diamond festoon brooch, she wasn't reminiscing, she was healing. That modest, shimmering piece had belonged to Princess Andrew of Greece, her German mother-in-law, and in wearing it during her historic post-war visit to Germany, Elizabeth sent a message clearer than any treaty. The brooch became a balm, quietly stitching diplomatic wounds still fresh with memory. Such subtlety became her trademark. Her jewelry choices marked transitions and turning points where history could change with a glance. When she allowed a young Princess Anne to wear the Burmese ruby tiara, the Queen wasn't merely lending a crown, she was signaling readiness, acknowledging Anne's growing presence within the firm. Later, Camilla's donning of the Prince of Wales's feathers brooch wasn't an arbitrary decision. It was the Queen's deliberate approval of Camilla's evolving role, however controversial, within royal duties. But even these significant gestures paled in comparison to the more covert operations within the royal wardrobe. Because, in Elizabeth's world, tiaras were not ornaments. They were endorsements. Who wore what and when was a matter of institutional messaging. Each piece passed along came with unspoken responsibility and implied favor. These were never random decisions. They were strategic placements designed to mold perception and solidify loyalty. When Diana was handed the Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara, it wasn't about grandeur, It was about inclusion. It was a visual nod that Diana wasn't just entering the family, she was becoming its face. Yet when that same tiara was quietly withdrawn, amid the breakdown of Diana's marriage, it was equally telling. The Queen had withdrawn her visual blessing. The monarchy had shifted allegiances without uttering a single word. And the public, trained by decades of subtlety, understood. Elizabeth's language of jewels wasn't one of vanity or indulgence. It was a lifelong orchestration of power, loyalty, and control. She used tiaras not to sparkle, but to speak. Brooches were her press releases, necklaces, her letters. She knew the world watched, and she chose her messages carefully, sometimes expressing more through a gemstone than through a public address. But even the most carefully placed brooch couldn't speak louder than what came next: the Queen's unprecedented decision to pass her legacy through jewels. When Catherine wore the Cartier halo tiara on her wedding day, it wasn't just tradition, it was a royal endorsement written in diamonds. For the world, it was a beautiful moment, a commoner marrying a future king beneath centuries of royal expectation. But behind palace doors, there was a seismic shift. That tiara wasn't randomly selected from the vault, it carried with it a century of quiet authority. Originally commissioned by King George VI for his wife, the future Queen Mother, it represented youth, promise, and responsibility. And unlike many of the more frequently rotated jewels, the Cartier halo tiara had been used sparingly, reserved for symbolic milestones that demanded clarity without speech. Its return to the public eye on Catherine's wedding day wasn't simply a stylistic choice. It was the Queen's declaration that Catherine wasn't just stepping into royalty, she was stepping into legacy. Queen Elizabeth had worn the tiara briefly in her youth, but had rarely brought it into circulation during her reign. Its deliberate absence made it all the more powerful when it reappeared. This wasn't just jewelry, it was the passing of a torch. As Catherine walked down the aisle, she carried more than flowers. She carried a burden the Queen had prepared her for silently, methodically, and with unmistakable intent. The tiara, once entrusted to the most sacred of royal moments, now sat atop the head of a woman who had no aristocratic lineage but had earned something far more precious. And yet, perhaps the loudest message was not who wore it, but who never did. Camilla, despite her proximity to the throne, had never once been seen in the Cartier halo. It remained untouched by her tenure, absent from her rise as Queen Consort. That omission wasn't logistical, it was ideological. Queen Elizabeth had drawn a clear boundary. The jewels that symbolizes purity of intention, service, and unity weren't handed to just anyone with a title. They were bestowed upon those who symbolized stability, respect, and the ability to lead without fanfare. In the Queen's eyes, Catherine embodied that balance. Camilla did not. What Catherine wore that day wasn't just a historical artifact, it was a coded message. The Queen had foreseen the battles ahead, the need for a new generation to carry the crown's weight with grace, without scandal, and without breaking under pressure. Catherine, with her quiet resolve and unwavering public image, was the chosen vessel, and the tiara made that abundantly clear. Royal watchers took note. Journalists speculated. But within the family, there was no speculation, only acknowledgement. The Queen had spoken, not in press releases or televised interviews, but in gold, platinum, and diamonds. Catherine's wedding day marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where tradition wasn't abandoned but reborn. It was the start of a calculated unveiling, a legacy being stitched into the future, one jewel at a time. And that tiara was only the beginning. One by one, the Queen entrusted her most prized heirlooms to Catherine, each with a silent message. It gleamed beneath the lights at a royal gallery. But the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace carried decades of political intent and unspoken expectations. To the casual eye, it was nothing more than a masterpiece of diamonds and platinum, dazzling and rare. But behind the shimmer lay a message forged in the final breath of the empire. The necklace had been a wedding gift in 1947 from the Nizam of Hyderabad, one of India's most powerful rulers, to the then Princess Elizabeth. It was not a gesture of personal affection, it was a diplomatic maneuver. At the cusp of independence, as the British Empire unraveled, the necklace served as a final thread meant to preserve goodwill. It was a calculated offering, lavish and symbolic, given not merely to the bride, but to the future of British royalty itself. Queen Elizabeth understood the magnitude of that gesture. Throughout her reign, she wore the necklace sparingly, reserving it for moments where quiet strength was more appropriate than public speeches. When the Queen entered diplomatic receptions or international state dinners with the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace resting on her shoulders, it wasn't jewelry on display, it was history resurfacing. Every gem embedded in the piece echoed the fading days of colonial rule, the tension of transition, and the delicate balance of former power and future partnership. So when Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, wore that same necklace in 2014 to the National Portrait Gallery, the choice wasn't made by a stylist, it was chosen by legacy. In the middle of an event meant to celebrate British culture and influence, Catherine's appearance in the Nizam's gift reactivated the Queen's original message: diplomacy through grace, presence, and control. But now, that power was being handed to someone new. Catherine wasn't just representing the crown, she was slowly being shaped to carry it. This was not the Queen being nostalgic. This was strategy. She knew precisely what message such a move would send. By allowing Catherine to wear one of the most historically loaded pieces in her private collection, the Queen was transferring more than diamonds. She was transferring trust. It was a quiet ceremony, without announcing a silent elevation of Catherine's royal standing before the public even realized what had happened. And the message didn't stop there. When Catherine appeared in the necklace again during a 2019 diplomatic corps reception at Buckingham Palace, an event thick with ambassadors and foreign dignitaries, the signal was impossible to miss. She was no longer just the future Queen Consort. She was already becoming the monarchy's diplomatic face. The necklace, gifted during the Empire, now adorned a woman symbolizing modern royalty, graceful, composed, and internationally respected. In a world where headlines scream and scandals echo, the monarchy has always relied on symbolism to speak louder than controversy. Elizabeth mastered that art. And in Catherine, she found a protégé who could carry the message forward, not with force, but with elegance. The necklace had served its purpose once in holding a crumbling empire together. Now, it has found a new role uniting a new era. And while necklaces offered diplomacy, earrings whispered lineage. The Queen was building more than the image, she was crafting succession. Dangling from royal ears for nearly a century, the Greville chandelier earrings aren't just heirlooms, they're an unbroken link between queens. They began their journey in the hands of Dame Margaret Greville, a wealthy socialite with deep connections to the British aristocracy. Upon her death, her exquisite jewelry collection was gifted to the Queen Mother as a gesture not only of friendship but of trust. Among the collection's most mesmerizing pieces were the chandelier earrings, cascading with diamonds, graceful yet imposing, embodying both femininity and the silent strength expected of a royal matriarch. The Queen Mother wore them with pride during countless state occasions, making them part of the fabric of royal history. When Queen Elizabeth II inherited them, she too wore them not for glamour, but for symbolism. They were a nod to her mother's quiet power and her own unshakable sense of duty. These earrings became more than jewelry. They were a legacy passed down, imbued with stories and expectations. Their sparkle wasn't just from finely cut stones, it was from decades of service, sacrifice, and survival. Every public appearance in those earrings reminded the world of the enduring grace of the monarchy and the women who bore its burdens with poise. So when Catherine, Princess of Wales, wore the very same earrings at the royal wedding in Jordan in 2023, it wasn't a coincidence, it was choreography. She paired them with the lover's knot tiara, once famously worn by Diana, Princess of Wales. This was not a case of nostalgic fashion. This was a deliberate act of alignment. In that single appearance, Catherine connected herself to three of the most iconic royal women, Queen Elizabeth II, the Queen Mother, and Diana. It was a masterstroke of symbolism, a display of continuity and quiet command that needed no words. These acts weren't styled, they were scripted, and the author behind them had long been Queen Elizabeth herself. With every piece of jewelry Catherine now wore, the Queen's voice echoed. The Greville earrings, in particular, weren't just passed down, they were earned. To wear them was to declare oneself part of a dynasty built on grace under pressure, on duty over desire. And Catherine, in that moment, wasn't just a duchess or a future consort. She was the present embodiment of everything the monarchy had been, and everything it needed to become. The choice of these earrings during a foreign royal celebration also served a secondary purpose. They signaled that Catherine's role had expanded beyond the UK. She was now a representative of royal tradition on the world stage, stepping into the diplomatic and symbolic shoes once filled by her predecessors. The earrings didn't just whisper heritage, they shouted legitimacy. But one jewel above all drew sharp royal lines, the lover's knot tiara, and it spoke the loudest when it returned to public view. Originally worn by Princess Diana and veiled in heartbreak, the lover's knot tiara returned to the spotlight, but this time on a different head. It was once the most photographed tiara in the world, not because of its value, but because of the woman who wore it and the tragedy she carried. Commissioned in 1914 for Queen Mary and modeled after a design worn by her grandmother, the lover's knot tiara was steeped in royal tradition. It was intended to symbolize devotion, loyalty, and lineage, a perfect blend of sentiment and power. But when it passed to Diana, Princess of Wales, the narrative changed. Instead of security, it echoed turmoil. Worn during public appearances, the tiara sparkled while Diana's world fell apart behind palace walls. It became a paradox glamour, hiding grief. After her marriage crumbled, the tiara vanished, quietly removed from circulation, as if the crown itself couldn't bear to see it worn again under such heavy emotional shadow. For years, it remained unseen, locked away like a chapter the monarchy wanted to forget. And yet, it lingered powerful in absence. No royal wore it, not even Camilla, despite her rise in the royal ranks and her eventual coronation as Queen Consort. The message was unmistakable. That tiara was more than a relic. It was a scar. Then, it returned. But not to its former place of heartbreak. It reappeared on Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and everything changed. This wasn't just a stylistic decision. It was the monarchy rewriting its narrative. In Catherine's hands, or rather, on her head, the tiara was reborn. She wore it not with tragedy, but with strength. Where Diana's eyes had shown pain, Catherine's revealed quiet resolve. The royal family didn't issue a statement, but it didn't need to. The reintroduction of the lover's knot tiara on Catherine's crown was a royal decree of continuity redeemed, restored, and reclaimed. The choice to bypass Camilla for such a historic and emotionally charged piece wasn't accidental. Camilla, despite holding the title of queen, remained symbolically distanced from the jewels that defined the monarchy's emotional lineage. Her omission from wearing the lover's knot was deliberate, a silent affirmation that not all crowns are equal, and not all tiaras are transferable. Camilla could wear the jewels of duty, but not of legacy. That right, it seemed, belonged only to those who symbolized healing rather than division. Catherine's poise gave the tiara something it never had before: peace. It no longer bore the weight of conflict, but radiated with quiet power. And in that singular moment, the monarchy told its story without words. A woman once haunted by the past had been replaced by one who understood it and still chose to carry it forward. The lover's knot tiara was no longer a symbol of fractured fairy tales. It had become a crown of resilience. Still, one question loomed large. Why was Camilla left out entirely from these royal tokens? Despite being Queen Consort, Camilla's name was missing from the Queen's private inheritance plans, and that silence said everything. It wasn't a clerical oversight. It wasn't a forgotten footnote in a vault somewhere. It was a decision, intentional and deliberate, taken by a monarch who never acted without purpose. While Camilla wears the crown in public, behind closed doors, she remains on the outside of a sacred inner circle. The late Queen Elizabeth II left behind a carefully curated personal collection of jewels, pieces loaded with memory, loyalty, and silent judgment. These weren't the ceremonial crown jewels held in trust for the institution. These were personal. And in that private world of inherited trust, Camilla was excluded. To understand why, one must remember that the monarchy is as much about perception as it is about lineage, and the public's perception of Camilla was never clean. Her entry into royal life was marked by decades of scandal and whispered betrayal. The wounds left behind by Diana's tragedy never truly healed in the public's heart. Camilla, for all her efforts to steady her image, never transcended the shadows she once stood in. Queen Elizabeth, master of image and legacy, knew this better than anyone. She understood that the jewels she personally owned carried more than sparkle. They carried weight. They were tools of legacy, building, used not to flatter, but to endorse. And in Camilla's case, that endorsement never came. Camilla has been allowed to wear pieces from the crown collection, those legally owned by the monarchy itself. That was protocol. That was duty. But the Queen's personal jewels? They were given only to those who embodied something deeper: stability, grace, and above all, unity. To hand those to Camilla would have signaled absolution. It would have rewritten a past that too many still remember with bitterness. Elizabeth chose legacy over hierarchy. She chose message over motion. By withholding her personal collection from Camilla, the Queen sent a statement that words could never capture. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about preservation. She wasn't punishing Camilla, she was protecting the monarchy's image, its future. The jewels, after all, are not just gifts, they are symbols of continuity. And continuity cannot rest on controversy. It must stand on someone who evokes reassurance, not division. This exclusion didn't go unnoticed within the family. While Camilla continued her royal duties with practiced composure, those closest to the crown understood what had happened. The Queen had drawn a symbolic line, and that line stopped short of Camilla. Instead, Elizabeth's most intimate treasures found their way to Catherine, whose journey into royalty was unmarked by scandal, defined instead by resilience and unwavering public grace. In Catherine, the Queen saw a future untouched by old wounds, and it was Princess Anne, guardian of truth and tradition, who ensured the Queen's vision wouldn't be buried with her. She rarely speaks. But when Princess Anne does, the monarchy listens, and her latest revelation could reshape royal history. Known for her steadfast dedication and unyielding loyalty, Princess Anne has long been the quiet backbone of the royal family. While her siblings navigate the public eye with varying degrees of spectacle, Anne's strength lies in discretion and duty. Now, she has stepped forward with a confession that echoes far beyond palace walls. It was she who bore the burden of her mother's final wishes, a sacred trust to protect the family legacy at all costs. Elizabeth's vision for the monarchy wasn't a fleeting whim. It was a calculated blueprint carefully guarded by her most trusted confidants. And Anne was among the select few who truly understood the depth of that plan. In her candid admission, Anne revealed that the jewels passed to Catherine were not mere gifts but symbols of earned respect. Unlike the flashy headlines or whispered scandals that have often engulfed the family, Catherine's ascension came through quiet service, relentless grace, and unwavering commitment. Anne believes that these priceless heirlooms were bestowed upon someone who not only understands the weight of history but also carries its burden with dignity. It is a recognition of character over bloodline, a testament that legacy is crafted through actions, not just birthright. Yet Anne's message was not without its veiled warnings. While her tone remained diplomatic, her words to Camilla carried undeniable weight. It was a subtle reminder that royal privilege is never guaranteed. It is always conditional, contingent on loyalty and public trust. By emphasizing Catherine's rightful inheritance, Anne highlighted a deeper truth. The monarchy must align itself with those who unify rather than divide. Camilla's exclusion from this private bequest was not an oversight, but a deliberate choice to safeguard the institution's future image. Anne's revelation stands as a powerful assertion. Legacy is more than blood. It is about resilience, service, and the courage to embrace the crown's demands without faltering. In these moments, the monarchy's fate is quietly decided not in grand proclamations, but in the passing of jewels, the acceptance of duty, and the unspoken acknowledgement of who is truly prepared to lead. As the monarchy faces a new era, the question remains, will Catherine rise to the moment carved out for her in diamonds? She wears them with grace, but every jewel on Catherine's body is a declaration. She is the future of the monarchy. From the moment Catherine stepped into the public eye, she became more than just a princess or a consort in waiting. With each carefully chosen appearance, draped in jewels once belonging to Queen Elizabeth herself, she wove a narrative of continuity and strength. These gems were not mere accessories, they were tools of silent power, shaping how the world saw the monarchy's future. Catherine's elegance redefined royal imagery, blending modern sensibility with deep respect for tradition. In her poised presence, the monarchy found a new voice, one that could speak to a changing world without losing its historic roots. Every time Catherine adorns herself with the Queen's jewels, she sends a message that resonates far beyond the palace gates. A brooch here, a necklace there, each piece tells a story of duty fulfilled and heritage honored. Her appearances reassure a public wary of change that the monarchy remains steadfast, anchored by the same values that defined the late Queen's reign. Yet Catherine does not merely replicate, she reinvents. She respects the past while boldly shaping what comes next, embodying the delicate balance between preservation and progress that the crown desperately needs. The public's embrace of Catherine is telling. Unlike previous royal figures burdened by controversy, she has captivated hearts with authenticity and grace. Seen as both a modern woman and a guardian of centuries-old customs, she bridges divides in a fractured world. This acceptance is crucial. It signals a renewed legitimacy for the monarchy in an era where relevance is hard-won and tradition is constantly questioned. Looking ahead, all eyes turn toward Catherine's future coronation, a moment anticipated to echo Queen Elizabeth's iconic aesthetic. It promises to be more than a ceremony. It will be a symbolic passing of the torch, steeped in history yet infused with fresh energy. The jewels worn, the gestures made, and the manner displayed will all underscore Catherine's role as the custodian of royal legacy and the harbinger of its evolution. In every thread of her royal wardrobe, Catherine honors the sacrifices and triumphs of those who came before, while positioning the monarchy for survival and respect in a rapidly shifting world. She understands that power today is less about decree and more about symbolism, perception, and quiet influence. From quiet gestures to glittering tiaras, the crown's future rests not on ceremony but on symbolism, and Catherine is already wearing it well. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.